Hello everyone and welcome to our 5-question series. This time we have Anupam Sengupta, who is the co-founder and CTO of GuardHat Inc. As usual, it's me, Flavio Villanustre. I will be asking some questions to Anupam. I've known Anupam for now many years. He has a very interesting background and he has been a technologist for 20 years or more. He is, as I said before, the co-founder and CTO of GuardHat, but he has also, as you can see, a very large and prolific background in technology. He's been involved in a number of organizations in a large type and number of roles, including consultancy, and this is managing very large accounts. And also he has been the client partner at PNC Bank, among other roles, which is, in case you don't know, the 6th largest retail bank in the U.S. There he managed a team of almost 1,000 people. But what brings us to the table today is the fact that Anupam has been involved with HPCC for several years now. He developed and implemented an entire system to manage a very large IoT deployment for all of these hardhats. These are smart hardhats that use HPCC in the back end to perform event correlation, data analysis, data alert generation, and more. So I think he put HPCC to an interesting use case, and it will be very interesting to know a little bit more about his experience and what he has done so far. So welcome, Anupam. Thank you very much for being here with us. I enjoy doing this, and I hope you will enjoy it too.
Thank you, Flavio. It's always a pleasure.
So, Anupam, let's get started. What prompted you to create this smart hard hat? It sounds like a good idea. It sounds like something that I should have done and someone else should have done, but we didn't, and you did. So, why did you? What brought you to do that?
Great question, Flavio. So, a little bit of a background probably would help here, where one of the last things I was involved in prior to starting GuardHat and also the other co-founders of the company was actually in heavy industrial manufacturing in the U.S. We were, till 2014, operating the 4th largest steel manufacturer in the U.S., supplying the auto manufacturers, appliances, and quite a few other end customers, with multiple operations across the country. So we had steel mills in the South, we had one in Detroit, where I'm based out of. And one of the key challenges which we faced, apart from obviously trying to make the operations faster, better, more productive, was that we had a large worker base, in the multiple thousands, who were coming into our workplace every morning or at the beginning of every shift. And the challenge basically was to ensure that they went back home, at least in the same shape that they came in. In other words, how do we ensure workers' safety? This is, believe it or not, a big portion of how operations happen in industrial segments. It's obviously true for every single part of our industries, but especially in heavy industries where the work environments are not exactly the safest places in the world, this becomes even more important. And it's very challenging to implement in real life because unfortunately, what we found is that while we had a lot of technology and process elements when it came to the production side of things, in other words, as we were making the widgets better or faster, more efficient, more cost-effective, the processes around safety, however, have been trailing for decades quite a bit. And this is not just me speaking. If you look at OSHA's records, if you look at the incidents, if you look at the statistics, which unfortunately have been stagnating over the last decade or so, where every single day, even today in the U.S., we have approximately 13 fatalities, workplace fatalities, every single day of the calendar year. So that's obviously not a situation that is something you can support, and you obviously need to optimize and make sure that things get better. So that was the problem statement that we started with. And frankly, it was a little serendipitous in terms of how GuardHat got started. we were looking for a solution ourselves. We would have been the end customer at that point of time if GuardHat had existed, frankly. So we had a certain product set in mind, a certain product feature set in mind. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anything. So long story short, in 2014, we decided to form this company because we thought we had an idea that was worth testing out in the market. 5 years later, we obviously are still around. So it has been successful. It has been something that even I sometimes wonder why, hadn't come earlier. Frankly, would have made my job easier in that particular role if the product had existed then. So that's why GuardHat was born. And then what GuardHat is about, without going into too much detail, obviously the website is there, guardhat.com, for people to look at. But essentially what we have built is a IoT, or a connected device platform, which blends in hardware wearables, which we manufacture. It blends in quite a bit of infrastructure components to tie everything together, from real-time positioning to data streaming, audio-visual communications, and also a mass volume data ingestion from sensory systems to the backend where HPCC comes in. So we have our own IoT platform. We integrate very heavily with HPCC. As you mentioned, we started pretty early on with HPCC actually in 2015 itself. So it's been 4 years and going strong. And that's where the whole story started.
Hey, Anupam, I always want to ask you, and I never could, but why HPCC? How did you get to pick HPCC? And why did you pick HPCC and not something else?
Great question. So in 2014, when we started, we were a 4-member startup. That's it. The co-founders, including myself, sitting in a garage trying to chalk out the next big idea and basically trying to choose the best fit solutions for all the components. GuardHat is a very large system. And again, it's not just software, it's software, hardware, and a lot of communication systems that also come along with it. So it's basically a soup to nuts solution when it comes to what we were trying to engineer. So one of the things, especially on the data front, that I was looking at as a CTO was a system that would essentially deliver the scale that we were looking for, because scale and performance, because this is an IoT system. And just to give you a sense of the data volumes, every single device that we have today generates close to 20 megabytes of data, give or take, every work shift, every 8 hours. So multiply that by 3, and you have close to 60 megabytes of data that needs to be processed every single day from each device. And every site that we deploy can have anywhere between 100 to 1,000 such devices, or even more in very large scale sites. So just do the math, and you start to see the kind of data volume that's becoming staggering. And there's pure sensory data. This doesn't even include media and other things that we can also process. So obviously processing that volume of data efficiently as well as reliably was one of the key concerns. The other thing is that we wanted to have something which also had a low latency performance, because there's a safety system. So I cannot depend on a system that takes its own sweet time or does it in batch, or shows me the result tomorrow. I need it here and now. And when I say here and now, we were looking for sub-second resolution or sub-second latency in certain cases. So at the same time, obviously as a startup, resource constraint, we really didn't want to, build another cathedral, so to speak. So while there were and still are a lot of very good components out there in the market, both open source and of course commercial, I was looking for something which essentially would be just a pre-packaged solution, open the box, turn a few dials, and you're ready to go. And that's where HPCC actually came into the radar. I was aware of HPCC in the past, and it was a little serendipitous where a friend of a friend kind of recommended that, why didn't you look at HPCC again, because this might fit your bill. And again, within the first week of downloading it from your website, tinkering with it a little bit on a small laptop, believe it or not, with the entire system running on a single virtual machine, we decided that this is a system for us to go with, because end of the day, it truly achieved the requirements which we had, but more importantly, the overall out-of-the-box experience of just installing it, getting the console ready to go, and looking through your documentation that HPCC always has great support behind it. Looking through that and the tutorials, we were basically up and ready with at least a prototype system within the first 7 days. And that sort of clicked at that point, which basically made us say that this is the system for us. Especially for a startup, getting the same sort of performance from a very large-scale system with all the components built in, HPCC was a dream come true for us in that sense.
Wow, that's an amazing story. Thank you for that. That's a great story. And I also, as you were speaking before, I was making the image in my mind of you, the four of you in a garage, coming up with this new company and new ideas. It's a great story of entrepreneurship as well. That's great. But so being entrepreneur as you have, I'm sure you had many challenges. What was your biggest challenge at the beginning when you were trying to develop this GuardHat, the company and the solutions, of course?
So every startup has its own challenges, but the biggest challenge really, which is common across all small companies, all entrepreneurs in general, and startups, not only as traditional startups where four guys, like the guy was very nice, by the way, so I don't want to give a false picture there. We did have AC there as an example, but but one of the biggest challenges always is that you're resource constrained, and this is true for even companies or teams within a large organization. If you're doing a skunk work, if you are pressured for time or resources, which everyone has at different scale, and this is the biggest issue. So resources in terms of skill sets, resources in terms of time, resources in terms of making things happen quickly. So I guess time is the biggest resource constraint that we always had. So that was one of the things that we wanted to overcome pretty quickly. So apart from the usual engineering challenges that any startup faces, because you're obviously trying something new and you're not very sure as to whether you'll succeed or not. I mean, as they say in the startup world, the only constant is failure. So you're striving for success. That's the only path that you are trying for, but every other path leads to failure. So making sure that we were able to prototype things quickly, fail fast quickly if something didn't work out so that we could try something out, was the biggest challenge for us to manage. And again, I think that's where systems such as HPCC proved very useful, because we weren't spending months on end, trying something out, building out all the components, stitching things together. We had a system where we could quickly kick the tires, see its capabilities, understand the limitations as well. In certain cases, there were limitations that we had to work around. But by and large, the quick feedback and the self-contained system that HPCC provided became a very large asset for us, almost a force multiplier, so to speak.
That's good. That's very good. Yeah. So, in your opinion, what is that thing that sets apart HPCC from other open source big data platforms? What makes it different?
I think there are really two things, and I might have mentioned this before, but to you at least, Flavio. For me, the biggest thing was that it is completely self-contained. You have all the pieces that you need to make things happen. And when I say all the pieces, you don't necessarily need to use all the pieces, obviously, from day one, which is another good thing. So what you don't know is not going to hurt you, at least on day one. So that's always good to have. But at the same time, it scales up very nicely in terms of both its capabilities and feature sets. So that's been one of the key things that we have also grown along. I mean, our first 2 years was the first 2 years for us when we were developing the product, when it was in its infancy at GuardHat, both on the software side and hardware side. We were iterating through various options, various feature sets, and we collaborated with you quite a bit, by the way, your engineering teams especially on that. That was a very interesting phase from an engineering perspective. But even today, as we scale up further, since we now have a product that is in the market, it's stable, it's achieved a certain level of feature compatibility against what we had envisioned, we are still finding new use cases for it. Just to give you an example, we are now finally getting into the area of ML and AI in terms of, because we do have the corpus of data, we do have the capability, and the baseline is already set in terms of its core nuts and bolts, so to speak. And we are looking at HPCC again to actually process some of those things for us. And so it's a system that has grown along with us. Now, obviously, there may be at a point where we have to bolt on something on top of it, but so far it has really been a very pleasant journey with us with the HPCC. The other thing which I would really mention as a key thing that probably people sometimes underestimate, which is another distinguishing factor, is both your level of documentation and, I would say, assets around the product whether it be tutorials, whether it be the documents that you provide, and more importantly, the access that at least we had to directly to your engineering team, where I always knew that if I had a question, you were just literally an email or like call away, even though, we're treating you as open source, so to speak. That has been an awesome distinguishing factor as far as HPCC is concerned for us.
That is great. I hope it continues to be the same way, and of course, we and the rest of the community will always be behind HPC systems. So that's great. So I'll ask you something that is probably close to impossible, but pull out your crystal ball and tell me how and where do you see GuardHat getting in 10 years from now? So far, you have, I think, a fantastic road, and you have done things that were almost unthinkable of 5 years ago. But now, in 10 years, in 2030, where do you think GuardHat being?
That does require the crystal ball. Let's try 10 years to start with. Even within the last 4 years, we have evolved a lot, both in terms of what we have been doing and also the product set itself. To give you a very simple example, when we started this journey, when I met you for the first time as an example, and even the name of the company reflects that, we were heavily focused and completely focused on the safety use case in the industrial workplace. But what we unknowingly created really is a data platform as well as an IoT platform that can actually, and which we realized pretty quickly as we started engaging with our end customers ourselves, is that what we essentially have built is a platform that can provide a lot more capabilities using data processing and connected devices, not just GuardHat's own devices, but third-party devices as well as other systems, not just hardware devices, but data ingestion from other real-time systems, and provide essentially a connected worker experience. In fact, there is a terminology that is used in the industry today. It's called Industry 4.0, which deals with virtualized digitization on the operations, having a real-time view of what you do, how you do it, which is pegged ultimately in having access to real quality data and accessing and processing it in real time. And what we have evolved into is really something similar to that vision. At least it's a big subsection of it, the connected worker space. So in 10 years, what I envision is that while the safety solution will always exist, that's the reason we ourselves started the company, and that's the element of what we believe in. But GuardHat as a system, GuardHat as a platform, and as a company, probably will be in a lot of places that we ourselves didn't imagine. So whether it's in connecting with the production systems, operating with a digital twin of a worker, not just on the safety side, but actually knowing exactly what's happening to your workers in real time at any point and any part of the world, whether it be in Gulf of Mexico or in Upper Alaska, if you're mining out there, and providing a very, very transparent enterprise that not only integrates with the rest of the operational systems that you have, but essentially becomes the backbone for it, essentially becomes the data bus for it. Hardware-wise, obviously things change. It's a wish list, but I think 10 years is a long time where it might actually come true, is that we might be running HPCC on our hats itself in 10 years. With the progress that is being made in silicon, it's not that far away, where in 10 years, Flavio, I'll be saying that we just ran HPCC off my hat. How about that?
That sounds like a great closing. Anupam, thank you very much. Thank you for these very thoughtful answers, and it has been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Flavio.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone.
It's been a great journey.
Yes, it has been. It has been. It has been on both sides. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.